Hi, this is Brian with Prophetless Media and Post, and today we're going to do a tutorial on removing a person from a video and having them reappear in Fusion. I recently had a comment from someone who had watched a video by CM de la Vega that did this effect in After Effects using stock energy effects, and thought we could do the entire thing inside of Fusion. Okay, so here we are in Fusion, and here's our shot, and we have this guy running towards the basket, and what I'd like to do is somewhere around like frame 30, we're going to have him disappear with an energy effect and particles. And then we're going to have him reappear just before he gets ready to jump to shoot the ball. So somewhere around frame 70. So the way that we're going to approach this is we're going to use the planar tracker to stabilize the footage and use that to make clean plates that we're going to use to cut out and remove the basketball player in the shadow. I picked this shot because there's actually quite a few complications. It looks like it's pretty easy, but we're going to run into some issues. But let's just jump right into it. So the first thing we need to do is the planar track. Before we do that, though, I want to point out something that you may not notice right away, and that right here is the lens distortion, which is going to be really problematic for the planar tracker for the purposes of what we want to do in this shot. So the first thing we're going to do is we want to undistort this image. So let's add in a lens distortion and connect our clip to it. And let's, I don't know, somewhere maybe around frame 20 or anywhere in here, just so we can see this box. And what we can do to help us do this lens distortion is we can use a mask. So let's grab a polygon to kind of use as a reference. And so what I'm going to do is I want to click in each corner. So click in each corner, and now we have this box that we can use as a reference. And so to be able to do the adjustments and see the polygon at the same time, we're going to select both. Then click on the lens distort, and now you see we still have the polygon selected, so we can see it as we make our adjustments. Okay, so in the lens distort, we have it's already set to undistort, and that is correct. That's what we want to do. So let's open up the lens distortion model, and then we can start using these sliders to start undistorting the footage. Okay, so let's start with the distortion. And now if I start to bring this straight, you can see an issue here. So this is getting close. If we look at this, we just want to make this line straight. So it looks like it's straightening out here, but look at this warp right here. Now it could be that the chord could have an arch to it, which is very possible, but there's definitely some lens distortion in here too. So we're going to have to use more than just the regular distortion. So what we can use is the quartic distortion, which sort of pulls a little bit more in the center also. So we're going to have to use a combination of this distortion and the quartic distortion to try to figure this out. So this is an unusual example because this is a little bit more complicated than normal. A lot of times you won't even have to use lens distortion to do planar track, as you might well know. And even if you did have to undistort your footage, usually just the regular distortion will be enough. So anyway, the way to work this is we're going to bring the distortion down. And then once we bring the quartic distortion up, you can see that this is starting to get straighter. We still need a little bit more. And you're just going to play with these two until you can see it's getting straighter and straighter. So let's just play with these for a second. Maybe something like that. That's looking pretty good. Okay, we have to readjust because we did enough adjustments. And we'll just bring these back to the corner and just kind of judge. Okay, so it's not bad. Right here, it looks good. The sides look pretty good. Down here at the end is still not really great. You can see that it's not perfect. But I think that's going to be all we can do. This lens distortion is complicated enough that it would probably be better to use a 3D tracking program to try to do this effect. So anyway, let's see if we can make this work. So that lens distortion looks pretty good. Let's use that. And now we're going to we can get rid of this polygon. And we're going to use this undistorted plate to track on. So let's add in the planar tracker. And over here on the side, you can see I have some rotos that I've already done for the person and the shadow. They're just real loose roto. You can see in a couple keyframes just to follow the shadows. Very simple. I'm going to copy the one of the person just so I can use that for an occlusion mask. And I'll paste it over here. Take that polygon and connect it to the occlusion mask. And then let's set up our planar track. So I'm going to use a frame as a reference frame. I'm going to use a frame right in the middle of the area that we want to erase this guy. That way, because I'm going to make a stabilized plate and I want it to be kind of equidistant from the 2 points. So that frame would be 50. So let's set this frame to 50 and let's draw our shape. I'm going to go like this. I'm just going to cover like this whole edge. I'm going to grab a little piece of this grass just because there's not much detail in here. So I want to make sure that it has plenty to grab from. And so the track is set, reference points. We'll leave everything at its default, and then let's track to the beginning. And then let's hit go to go back to our reference time and then track to the end. And this is going to be a little bit slower because of our lens distortion, but I think we're going to get better results. Okay, great. It's done. Probably didn't need to let it go that far because we really probably only need 80 to 90, maybe tops. Okay, so let's go back to our reference time. And I just want to check the track. And one way you can do that is by bringing the planar tracker up and change the operation mode from track to steady. And then under steady time, let's set it to this frame, which is 50. And we can kind of play it back and forth and see how well. Okay, it's not perfect, but this edge right here is pretty good. Now, if we had not done the lens distortion, you would have noticed this whole area in here would be wobbling because of this distortion. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. So before we move on to the next step, I want to actually come back to operation mode track, and I want to create a planar transform. Because we're going to need this, once we do our paint work and get our clean plates, we're going to need to reintroduce the tracking information to it. So we're going to do that now. And now let's start setting up our first plate. So we're going to give this a try with frame 50. So we're just going to use a still frame, and then we're going to paint using the stabilized version to grab other frames. So let's show you how that works. So I'm going to add a time speed. I'm going to connect my lens distortion here, and we want the speed to be 0. And the frame we want is frame 50, which is smack in between 30 and 70. With any luck, one painted frame will be enough to do the 40 frames, but we'll see what happens. And after that time speed, we want to hit paint. Grab the paint, put it up there, turn on the stroke because we want it to be on every frame. Turn on clone in the paint. And then under here, what we want in the source tool is that stabilized plate that we did from the planar track. So to get that, we're going to have to open up this planar track. And in the operation mode, we want to change it back to steady. And we already have it set to steady time at 50. So we should be all set. Okay. Now we go back to our paint. Let's take our planar tracker right here and click and drag it right into the source tool. And now when we start cloning, we're going to be cloning using this stabilized plate. The next thing we need to do is turn on still source because we want to use a still from the stabilized plate. Because we have this guy running through it, it would be really problematic. So it's better to do a still plate and add grain later. We can see what we're going to be doing with the paint by clicking on overlay. Now you can see we're at the source time is frame 0. And so you can see the frame that we have here. Right now we have this whole thing open. So technically speaking, we should be able to just, using frame 0, erase this guy and have it line up. So let's do that and see what happens. And we have his shadow over here we need to take care of. So something like that. So now we have a clean plate. And let's see how this all works. Let's finish setting this up to see what the final comp will look like. So we'll do that. We're going to do, let's see, we got our paint. It's going to go into the planar tracker. So now if we look at the planar tracker, you'll see that we have the motion back with our clean plate. Now, if this is really bogging down, here's a quick tip. Let's take a look at this. In this paint, let's put the paint back up. So instead of every time going through this whole process, what we can do is actually save our paint. And I meant to mention this earlier. If you want to do your paint work outside of Fusion, say in Photoshop, you could do this. You could right click and then click save image, and then you can save out that image and it'll be the full frame size. So we're going to do that with this image. So I have my paint here. I have it loaded up. I'm going to right click and I'm going to save the image. I'm going to save right here on the desktop, paint 50. And you can see I've already done this. Save, I'll just replace it. And then I'm going to go open my desktop, grab paint 50 and drop it in. Okay, so that's what this is. So I'm just going to take paint 50 and replace right here. And if you want, we can rename that. So we know that this is the clean plate based on frame 50. And this will just make it run a lot smoother. So now that we have that, remember that this is an undistorted plate. So we need to redistort it. So let's grab our lens distortion, copy that, then paste it, connect that up. In this lens distortion, we want to change it from undistort to distort. And then we're going to bring this in line. Now we got this a little bit backwards. Well, actually you can do it any way you want. You can bring in our paint in the foreground and cut it out, or you can bring it in as a background and cut out the foreground. So I'm going to do it with cutting out the foreground. So I'm going to swap these, swap the inputs. So the foreground is the main piece. And the way we can do that is using a mat control, drop that in. With that, the media in is going into the background. And then we're going to take our masks and drop it into the green input foreground. And inside the mat control, go to combine alpha. You can see already that it's getting ready to cut this out. We want it just the opposite because we want to make a hole right here. And then we just need to post multiply. So we'll hit that, and there we go. Now we have a hole. And when we put in our painted background plate, our clean plate, you can see it's gone. And now we can just go in and animate this mat coming on and off. So let's go to frame 30, and inside mat control, let's go over to settings, and under blend is what we're going to use. So if I bring that blend down, you can see there he comes. There he's back on. So we're going to have him on first, make a keyframe, and let's go forward a frame and then turn it up to 1 so he disappears. Then we're going to go to frame 70 when he's going to come back on. Keyframe at 1, and then we'll go one more frame and bring the blend to 0 to bring him back on. So now we have this clip where he disappears and then comes back on. Now this is all well and good. This looks pretty good. But let's double check what's going on here just to make sure. That's not bad. We have a little bit of discoloration here. But that may not be a big deal with all the effects that are going on. And then we have that right here. So it's a little bright right here. You can see that spot. But again, when we do the effects, this may not be a big deal. Now, if you wanted to try to fix that, I mean, overall, that's pretty good. let's finish it off first, and then we'll see if we have to do any more detail. So the last thing we need to do is if we look at this plate here, we have no grain. And it's not really grain, actually. It's more artifacts. One thing we could use is the JPEG damage. So we add a JPEG damage here. You can see that's we'll bring it in here. And then we can adjust these settings to kind of blend it in and look like this mess here. So let's see, we want to bring this way up. Let's bring the quality up, probably close to 80, and then press play. Yeah, I mean, that right there that's it. Well, sometimes you don't have to play around with it forever. That looks pretty good. So let's see how this all looks. Yeah, right there I'm not crazy about, so maybe a little bit more paint right there, and then right here seems a little bright. And honestly, let's take a look at the original footage. See, that's dark there. If we look at it, especially right in here, you can see that's fairly dark, and then it actually starts to become brighter. So there is a change. So one of the things we could do is we could paint a frame like 30 when he comes on, and then also a frame for when he comes off, and blend the two just to make it really clean. So let's take a look at that. So what we can do is go to our paint. And what we probably should do is copy this paint, but I'm going to risk it. We already rendered out our paint 50, and that actually looks pretty good. So I'm just going to leave that paint 50. Yeah, let's paint a frame for 30, and so it's going to be 31 is when he comes on. Goes off, is where we want to have a clean plate based on 31. So what we can do is go into our paint, and in our source time, let's put frame 31. Turn on overlay, and then now everything that's in here, this is the frame that he's going to come on. So what we can do is paint everywhere that's around him. So this is going to match exactly frame 31. So we can we'll see if it changes anything. Yeah, see, I can see some lightness happening right there. There's his head. Oops, that's all right. Oh, I don't want that. That's all right. So we put the overlay on, and then we're going to try to replace him. Let's go to frame 20. Could probably get rid of him there. And I'm just going to do little pieces at a time. Frame 0. And I'm going to go just a little bit past, like 40. So I'm trying to keep the frames that I'm using within a reasonable distance because of the light changes. To make sure all of this is like nice and... Okay, so that looks pretty good. So now this is going to be frame 31. So I'm going to right click, save image. And we'll do this as frame 31 and save that, replace it. And now we're going to do frame 71. So I'm going to write over all of this. So we want to go to frame 71, turn on overlay, and we want all of this information here to be redone. Okay. So let's just go in here, and you can see that shift. It's actually quite a bit of a shift. We'll just get rid of all this. Yeah, you can see that darkened up right in there. And that's where he shows up. Okay. So let me do the overlay, and then let's go, maybe I can go up. Yeah. Turn that off. I'm actually going to go, let's see. No, that's too much. I'm just trying to get this edge right there because I can tell it's a little dark. There you go. Okay, so that was a bunch of messing around, getting the colors, but I think they match up. So I'm going to right click and we'll save this image, and we'll save this as 71. Now that we have those three images, let's see if that works a little bit better. So I'm going to pull this out of the way, and let's bring in those images. So we have 31 and 71, and then we have this 50. So I'm going to rename these real quick. Okay, great. Let's undo the 50, and what we'll do is we're going to merge 31 over 71, and then connect that to the planar tracker. And now what we're going to do is use this merge to go between the two. So on frame 30, let's just start on frame 30, because that's about where we want this guy to come on, right? We can take a look at our image. So what we're going to do is over here in the merge, we're going to click on blend and put that to 1. And we want to switch over to 71 by frame 70. So at frame 70, we're going to blend. So just bring it to 0. And now when we look at this, we should see the blend. You can see the actual movement there. Now it looks weird because of the stabilization, but let's take a look at the final shot. Okay, that's a little messy. Okay, that one looks good. This 31 still looks kind of messed up. But what we can do is go, let's take our paint 31. I'm going to add an extra paint on it, and we'll do the same thing. So I'm looking through 31. Okay, yeah. And open up the paint. We're going to do still source. We'll grab our stabilized plate, bring it into the paint, and we can just fix up this little area. So I want this to be frame 31. Turn on overlay. Okay, so let's see. I want 44. Probably right there. That might do it. Let's see how that looks. Oops, turn off the overlay. And now, much better. Okay, so we just had to do that little paint fix, and hopefully that's it. Let's do a render at this point and see what we get. We got the grain in there, and it's looking pretty good. So that looks pretty good. I think that's good enough for part 1 of this tutorial. I'll see you back in part 2, which would come out probably sometime around Thursday next week, where we'll work on the energy effects and the particle effects, and we'll do any kind of cleanup that needs to be done once we put those effects in. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.